Story 1. I work at the Gold Coast Mall. Avoid the arcade at all costs. I've repeated this story to the police, the management, and even to that reporter from the Ledger, but I don't expect any of you to hear about what really happened. So here is as good a place as any to post it. I'm sad he's gone. He was only a few years younger than me. But as horrible as it might sound, I kind of expected the new guy wouldn't last too long. It sucked that he died. No, scratch that. It sucks that he's gone. But I warned him. Hell, we all did about the kind of place this was. But curiosity and stupidity got the better of him. For obvious reasons, I won't give you my real name or even my job spec here at the mall, but suffice to say I am part of a pretty sizable maintenance security team at the Gold Coast Mall. The new guy was Clay Henderson. He had been on the job a few days. His was the typical story of rural America. Peaked in high school and in need of a job. No special skills or accolades to his name, just a pair of hands and a basic work ethic. It was a pretty average 8-hour minimum wage job that even he could manage. But this isn't your average mall. Like a lot of other brick and mortar establishments, the Gold Coast Mall hasn't quite been the same since the rise of online retailers. Sure, they could try to have a new promotion with shiny ads and renovations, but ever since the mid-2000s, the old mall just hasn't seemed to recover. Driving past it on the freeway, you could see the difference. The once cheerful bright orange building, now a faded shade of yellow, paint peeling. Weather-beaten, it stands out amidst the plains like a deserted temple. The inside wasn't much better, with only a handful of stores and kiosks still up and running. You could take a stroll for up to 30 minutes at a time without coming across another living soul. Whatever stores that were still open were usually ran by aging vendors who were too broke and too old to move their business elsewhere. Yep, the Gold Coast Mall's best days seemed to be behind it, and the dull, musty stores were evidence of that. All except one. On the ground floor near the southern entrance of the mall was the arcade. Like everyone else, the owner, Harold Gerber, sort of moved on to greener pastures, although no one seems to know where he went or even when. Trevor, the old maintenance man, was the only person you might consider to be friendly to Harold, and he didn't have a clue where he went or why. He locked up for the night with Gerber's SUV still in the parking lot and came back the following morning to see it still sitting there. That was the story he told the police, and that's about the only one he'll tell you. Trust me, I've tried. With no owner and a dried-up customer base, the arcade should be just as dead as the dozens of other stores in the mall. Only it isn't. Once a week, Claude, the managing director of this sun-beaten turf, still instructs the cleaning staff to go in and give the arcade a good once-over. Maintenance crews come in and make whatever repairs to the games and the kiosks, under condition that none of the machines are replaced. No one knows for certain why that is, but an unspoken rule among the mall's few inhabitants know better than to be caught anywhere near it. Were there stories? You damn right. In a town as small as this, and a mall as small as this, there were bound to be rumors and gossip. Everything from an Harold running off with another woman to his gambling debts catching up to him spread like wildfire. It wasn't long before Harold's wife Doreen began visiting Claude's office more and more regularly. The last few visits were with her lawyer, trying to get every bit of information she could over where her husband disappeared to. Claude damn near gave himself an aneurysm trying to keep this out of court and the newspaper, but eventually, after a lot of convincing and a pretty hefty check. Doreen shut her trap and moved on. Who could blame her? What management paid her off with was a hell of a lot more than what Harold brought in with that arcade anyways. Life just kind of moved on in the mall. But the arcade was anything but uneventful. Not long after Claude decided to keep the arcade open, after Harold's disappearance, there was an incident with the cleaning team during one of their weekly cleaning visits. To this day, we never got official word on what happened, but from what I heard through the grapevine, one of the cleaning girls, Melissa, had what you might call a breakdown of some sort. Melissa was cleaning the ball pit at the back of the arcade by herself, while the staff polished and cleaned the machines. From what I was told, the laughter was the first sign something was off. Melissa just sat there at the edge of the ball pit. Not your mild giggle either. I'm talking a full-on belly laugh. Kevin Hart could have been in the arcade with a full-on Netflix special, and you might not have been able to get that king of response from Melissa. After dismissing it, the laughter became louder and louder, until one of the cleaning ladies swore that there wasn't just one person laughing but two. Melissa's laughter and someone else's. Only Melissa was the only person that was laughing that day. Eventually they had to call an ambulance when Melissa began laughing and convulsing. I wasn't at work that day. Trevor claimed he got footage of the EMTs loading Melissa in the back of the ambulance, but the old bastard forgot to switch the front camera to the rear camera on his cell phone and only managed to take 12 blurry photos of himself looking stupid. So much for evidence, but there were other incidents we couldn't ignore, like the time Zeeb from the electronics store was locking up for the night and swore he heard his own voice call to him from the arcade. Over a few drinks, Zeeb told me that the voice was an exact replica of his own, but it sounded happier. You could say he was just shaken over what happened to Harold and Melissa, but whatever he heard, it was enough to convince him to pack up shop and leave for good. And who could forget the suspected burglary? Only a few months ago, security came in to open up one morning and saw the doors of the back entrance broken down and burglar proofing destroyed. The thieves seemed to start with the arcade, but didn't seem to get the chance to go anywhere else. As part of Claude's policy, the doors of the arcade always remain open even after hours, when the mall's doors are locked, so the thieves didn't have to use their tools, which the security and police found still at the scene. Even the car believed to have been used as their getaway wheels was still in the parking lot by the time the security got there that morning. Claude chalked it up to the guys just deciding to go to a bigger, more profitable score than our dusty little mall. But we all know what really happened. Whoever was dumb enough to try and break in there after hours never left. I told Clay all these things not as some bullshit hazing ritual to frighten the newbie, but as a heads up on what he might face on the job here. Instead of meeting me with skepticism or even a slight grin, his eyes widened with every story. It wasn't long that he would visit every available kiosk trying to get more information on the arcade. Eventually he succeeded in getting onto Doreen to try and get some more information on what she knew about her husband's disappearance. But all she had for him was a few profanities and a threat of calling the police. After that confrontation, it wasn't long before Claude got word that Clay was snooping around and threatened him with termination if he didn't focus more on emptying the trash on time than constructing conspiracy theories. But it wasn't enough for Clay to back down. You see, a few nights ago Clay got the chance to lock up the southern entrance for the night. I blame myself because I should have known better than assigning him to that duty. I knew how enthusiastic he was for answers, and I practically waved that in front of him. By the time we got back to the mall the following morning, his busted down Nissan still sat in the parking lot. That's when it hit me what happened. We never saw him again. With Zeeb gone, the entire southern edge of the mall is deserted. I hear Claude talking about having the rent of those units in that part of the mall to attract more business, but I doubt that would work. Word travels fast around this town, so please ... Don't come to the Gold Coast Mall. Story 2. Goodbye, Arcade Boy. To the four of us, the arcade had always been a shelter from reality. Colored lights raining down amidst a maze of neon machinery as a deafening mesh of cheerful music barraged around us unrelentingly. Flashing cars and horses, balls rolling and jumping, the whirs of that stupid crane machine, and the dings of the hockey table. Goddamn, there was something strange about the owner, a middle-aged man who always seemed to be on the pinball machine. He'd let us play for free, hours at a time, as he watched over us from a distance, occasionally coming over to fix broken machines. It bothered me how silent he was, and whether he had motives in letting us frequent the place for free. But my friends and I weren't going to say no to free stuff. After all, the arcade was the only one in town, and we loved this place. That was until the day of our graduation. Somehow or another, all of us made it to college, except for Connor. It wasn't like he was stupid. Quite the contrary. He was probably what you would call a genius. We'd tried to top his high scores, but had given up in the end since he was levels beyond us. His reflexes were insane, and he could win any shooting game in their highest difficulties easily. Unfortunately, skipping so many exams was never going to end well, even in the shithole that was the school we attended. Not wanting to say goodbye, we visited the arcade one last time, pretending like it was going to be okay, that we had people other than each other that would truly care for us once we parted ways, that life was going to be fun, that we'd meet back here again sometime in the future, once we've all settled with our families, laughed together as we reminisce about all we've been through, and play that damn spooky hellish haunted house shooting game together again. God, I did wish time would just stop then, but maybe I should have been careful of what I had wished for. As the machines died down, one by one, their lights gradually dimming, their whirs diminished, the owner looked at us with pity. Connor started panicking, hyperventilating as he turned around and around, reaching for buttons he could still press, and for joysticks he could still move. Simon even started sobbing. Well, the owner said, still on his pinball machine, that's it for tonight, kids. I gave y'all extra time today. I just hope your parents won't be mad that you're this late. Hurry on home now. I scoffed. Funny that. Assuming our parents cared for us, yeah, good one. Let's just go, Lee whispered, choking up on her words. Thank you, mister, for everything. We tried to pull Connor off the Tetris machine, but he wouldn't budge. His entire body was shaking. The owner sighed as his ball fell down the middle. A game over chimed from his direction. I'm running out of time as well. Look, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'll give all of you a choice. Listen well." He snapped his fingers as we looked around, our eyes wide open with shock and bewilderment. The arcade came back to life, but there was something wrong. The lights had turned red, and the screens had become static. Distorted, familiar music accompanied by the now sinister, robotic laughter boomed across the room. The hum of electricity hurt my head as the smell of metal filled my nose. "What's happening?" Simon said, shaking. "You can stay," he answered, "or you can leave." The light from the exit compelled us to leave, sending shivers down our bones and telling us that we shouldn't be here right now. "Extra life," the announcer said as he pulled the plunger, sending another ball on its way across bumpers and flippers. "What do you mean, stay?" "Stay here," he said, "forever." We were stunned. As if that statement wasn't enough to shock us, the screens around us started projecting pixelated images straight out of our nightmares. Simon's abusive, alcoholic mother sitting on his couch, smiling directly at him and beckoning him to come home. Lee's father fantasizing about her, rummaging in her closet for her undergarments. Connor's screen brought up an image of the past, of his brother hanging from the ceiling with what seemed to be a sprite of young Connor dealing and crying on the floor. As for me, it was a black screen that showed my face and my face alone. He knew I was already living my nightmare, that I was in the process of leaving my friends, turning me into a prime prey to the loneliness that had been eating at my brain since forever. A countdown started at our screens, as if challenging us to make our choices. Continue with our shitty lives or let the game over screen come. "All of you are running and hiding," he said. "If you stay, you won't have to deal with what's waiting outside ever again." I could feel him smiling, even when I could only see his back. It was an otherworldly smile, one that made me sure his invitation was not out of his generosity and goodwill. I'm leaving," I said, standing up as I pressed the button. "So am I, Lee." Though she was still weak and shocked, pressed continue and managed to stand. I extended my hand to Simon, and he took it rather firmly. He slammed his button. "Let's go, Connor," Simon said, strangely resolute. Somehow making him face reality had made him braver, something the owner didn't seem to like. The arcade building shook in rage in response. "Connor?" Lee touched his back. As he turned his head, tears flowing down his cheeks. "I'm sorry." The number had hit 0. His tears turned black. His eyes caved inwards. "No, no, no, no," I said, grabbing his shoulders. The lights flickered, and when we saw him for the last time, he was smiling. Even amidst all the noise, we could hear him whisper his last words. "Thank you." Just like that, he was gone. We found ourselves outside the arcade and went home sobbing as we leaned on each other's shoulders, promising we'd have each other's backs, no matter what would happen in the future, and to come back looking for Connor. What we found the next day, when we came back to the arcade, pulled the ground underneath us and flipped our world upside down. The building was dilapidated, and the machines were all broken. Their screens shattered as dust and cobwebs covered their once lively machinery. We asked people who had passed by what had happened to the arcade, and they simply shook their heads. "I thought you were strange for hanging out every day here, but now I know y'all are screwed in the head." This place has been closed for nearly 10 years now. Given no other choice, we pressed on with our lives. 10 years later, here we are. Simon mended his relationship with his mother, and is now a successful family man. Lee found the courage to report her father's abuse to the authorities and continues to give a voice to those who need it. I still need my medications, but my friends keep me from falling off the tightrope even at my worst nights. However, no matter how much time has passed, we still haven't moved on from that incident. After all, we lost our best friend there. Every year, we'd gather back here in front of the old arcade. Every year, we'd sit from the outside looking in. And sometimes, just sometimes, we can almost see Connor through the door. His back towards us, his figure hasn't grown one bit, sitting there, pressing buttons at the Tetris machine. Story 3. Creepy arcade guy. I was 10 years old when this happened. My mother left me in one of the arcade shops in a mall. She goes to do some grocery shopping. After several games, I decided to play DD and asked a guide. Well, I thought he was a guide at first 'cause he's dressed like one to teach me how to use it. He was a tall and dark man with curly black hair and beard and seemed like he's in his late 30s, which makes him look a lot older than the other two employees working in that shop. But of course, since I'm just a child, I didn't care about such details. He looks really nice and helpful at first sight anyway. He obliged, taught me a little, and watched me closely as I danced through that game. I didn't mind it at first 'cause I thought he was trying to make sure I can manage the game by myself before tending to the other kids. However, several songs later, he was still standing beside the game screen, watching me. I don't know exactly how to describe his stares, but they're the kind that made me feel so unpleasant and uncomfortable that I could no longer concentrate on the game and eventually stopped playing. Even just remembering the memory of his stares until now sends shivers down my spine. I decided to try other games, but he also followed me in every single one. I kept doing it, playing different games, and like every 5 minutes hoping he'll get fed up and leave me alone. But he didn't. What makes it even creepier is that his facial expression from being the kind employee earlier is slowly turning to something a lot more serious and dark the longer he follows and stares at me. Then realization hit me. Taking a closer look, this man is no employee, and he wasn't exactly wearing a uniform. His clothes can be easily mistaken that he's one. I was a really shy kid, and despite having so many other children, their parents, and other employees in that shop, I didn't muster the courage to ask anyone for help. Since I was alone, they all seemed to think he's my guardian. I tried really hard to ignore his presence and just continued playing different games, hoping my tokens won't run out yet and that my mother would come pick me up soon. Until finally, I decided not to wait for my mother in the arcade shop and just go to the grocery store to find her. I was about to go down the stairs. The arcade shop was located on the second floor, and the grocery was on the ground floor when I noticed that this man still following me all the way outside the shop. He caught up to me fast and, to my surprise, whispered something in my ear, though I couldn't hear him well because of the noises from the arcade. Noticing my confused and pale expression, he smiled creepily as he slowly held my right shoulder and repeated more loudly, "What's your name?" Fortunately, at that very moment, my mother came to pick me up. I looked back at the man, and all of a sudden, his expression changed back to the kind and helpful guy who guided me earlier in the game. Still scared, I watched him as he played the nice guy to my mom who hasn't suspected a single thing. I didn't tell my mom that this guy was stalking and scaring me either. I just really want to leave and get out of there fast. When we were leaving, I looked back at the man once more and really, I wish I didn't, and he was still staring at me, waved, winked, and silently mouthed the words, "I'll see you." I've never been so scared throughout my childhood. Story 4: The time a man locked me inside his arcade. I've never told anyone about this in real life, but it happened about a year ago. I was sad about guy problems, and I didn't have any friends, so I went downtown alone to walk around and explore. It was starting to get dark, and I was about to leave, until I found a sign for a little arcade. There's a lot of old historical buildings downtown, and it was inside this building, almost hidden up a tiny staircase. I was immediately interested, so I went inside. It was really cute, like a curio shop full of so many collectibles, with a small arcade to the side of that room with classic old school game consoles. I was greeted by a man. He was wearing sweatpants and just socks. I actually thought he was cute, and I thought he was maybe 25. We didn't talk at first. I just played games until he asked if I wanted to try playing the Oregon Trail game on this old computer. He said the computer was normally just a display, but he'd let me play on it. So we started talking. Introduced himself as Jesse. He said he used to be a teacher, but quit to start his business. He said he owned the arcade and was the only employee. Offered me a soda, and he disappeared for like 2 minutes to get me the soda. When he brought it, it was already opened. I didn't think anything of this until later. We continued talking. He asked my age. I told him 20. He said he was surprised because he thought I was younger. I asked how young exactly, and he said I would have guessed you were a sexy 16-year-old maybe. What? This comment threw me off a lot. It wasn't a joke. He was serious. I asked him the same question. His reply was, to be honest, I'm 36. I was extremely shocked by this because he truly looked and sounded much younger. I didn't think he was much older than myself. He laughed and asked if that's too old for me. I said, yeah, kind of. The energy changed. After this, I started feeling really weird, like something bad could happen. I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I was sweating. The computer was in the literal corner of the room, and I felt boxed in. He asked why it's that bad, since I'm legal, complimented my body, and told me some things he'd like to do to my body. Then told me I should stop being a little bitch since I acted like I wanted him. He was no longer cute. He had a predatory look in his eyes. They were literally almost black. I've only seen that with one other person. I told him I had to go because my family was expecting me. They weren't. I tried to just walk out real quick, but the door was locked. He immediately said I just locked it so we could have privacy, but I guess you have plans. I was scared as fuck, and I genuinely thought he would not allow me to leave. But for whatever reason, he unlocked the door and I ran out of there. I only drank a couple sips of my soda. Thank God. I realized later that he may have drugged my drink. I don't know. I haven't told anyone because I felt like I was asking for it by going there alone and engaging with him at first. I looked up the name of the arcade, and I found his full name online. Jesse was not his real name. There were a couple local news articles about his arcade posted online and images of him. I found him on Facebook, and he has a wife and 2 daughters. I felt sick. The craziest part is, Months later, I saw him on Tinder, and his profile doesn't include his age somehow, and lists his name as Jesse. I'm glad nothing happened to me, and I think he needs to be stopped. But I don't want to get involved. Story 5. Story 5. I work at an arcade in a smallish town. There are some strange rules. This all happened before COVID-19 hit the world. I think it was in 2016, perhaps. I started working at the arcade some years before it all happened. I've had run-ins with the manager and all that. When I got hired, however, the manager made us all, as the new employees of the arcade, memorize some specific rules. These were unusual considering we were working at an arcade with things like Pac-Man and Frogger and Donkey Kong. You get the idea. Here are the rules of working at the arcade. Note that all of the events have happened at the same arcade. Rule number 1. If a new arcade game shows up either by the name of No Heart, No Soul, or with .exe on the end of the title, do not play it or let any patron play. This was the one rule that I almost broke. When I had to memorize the rules, my first thought was, that's the most ridiculous set of rules I've ever seen. After what has been going on, how could I not think they were serious? Originally, rule number 1 just had with .exe on the end of the title, but the part about no heart, no soul was added after the deaths of a 10-year-old non-binary kid named Gabriel Myers and a 14-year-old young woman named Natalie Schmalz happened as a result. According to the account of the manager, a former employee named Tomas Ferrier allowed the game to be played. The kids played the game. It displayed a creepy message, and it added a creepy-ass character with the player's name, which was uncanny, since arcade games shouldn't even have the player's name already if it wasn't entered. And the avatars, the kids had both talked to a character that looked like a mix of a female pirate and a biker punk. They then had to complete strange, difficult challenges. They couldn't complete them, resulting in the screen showing a message saying, "Game over." May the next victim play. Both Gabriel and Natalie went pale and catatonic after that, as if the game had stolen their souls. Another former employee named Marky Harrison recounted that the game had shown up in another arcade under a different name. Now I'm going to tell you about when I almost broke the rule. No, this did not involve no heart, no soul. The arcade had just opened up for business with Galaga, Ms. Pac-Man, a vehicle arcade of Batman, a dance machine, you name it. I was cleaning up before work when I noticed a new arcade game just got plugged in. Its title was Donkey Kong.exe. I at first shrugged it off, thinking it was a bootleg Donkey Kong arcade. But the rules, I snapped out of it and reviewed the rules. I read and reread rule number 1. Thinking it was ridiculous, I went and let the arcade open, ready for the patrons to play. But the kids immediately noticed the new Donkey Kong, and they all gathered around it out of sheer interest, almost as if they just became zealots for a deity of sorts. Mr. Crab, one of the kids, asked me, "Can I play this?" They were pointing to Donkey Kong. I was about to let her play it when the manager showed up out of nowhere. He came to me so fast, I swear he came up out of the ground. Rule number 1, Danforth. But I can't disappoint these kids. As if I'd allow the monster to do its thing. Whatever you do, do not let the arcade under any circumstances be played by anyone, including yourself. It has not succeeded in finding another victim in 6 months, and I will not let it happen again. Later, After the arcade closed, the game was unplugged, hauled off, and gone. No child played the game that day. Rule number 2. If no person comes out of the laser tag arena for 30 minutes after they enter, notify the manager immediately. After my run-in with the manager after nearly letting the girl play the game, how could I not want to follow the rules? This happened about a month after I saw Donkey Kong.exe. As a general rule, we have to observe the time of the next group of people playing laser tag goes in. We also have employees keeping watch on the laser tag in case of rule number 2. Normally, a period of laser tag lasts 20 minutes, so we're usually good on that. I had the shift that day. I watched the people go in, so I wrote down the time they went in. I know. We get bored on these kinds of things, but how can we not be bored when we just have to watch the entrance to the laser tag arena? The time was 2:37 p.m. when that group went in. I watched the entrance, glancing at my watch to make sure the laser tag game lasted 20 minutes and no longer. My co-worker Miles ghosted up to me as she always has. Danforth, how are you doing? Miles, don't you dare sneak up on me like that. I need to make sure that laser tag goes smoothly. Oh, that's what you have to do today. Okay. She went back to her janitorial duties. By then, I glanced at my watch. 3:05. I dashed straight to the manager's office after having noticed that nobody came out of the laser tag arena. After my run-in with rule number 1, how could I not? I burst the door open, and I said in a volume that was almost like shouting, rule number 2. Time was 2:37 p.m. 12 people inside. With this, the manager got up from his chair so fast I thought he was about to run for his life. Shit. Move aside. I knew this was going to happen again. I knew it. He grabbed a screwdriver and a wrench from his desk drawer and rushed straight to the laser tag arena. He opened the circuit breaker inside and did some things that would require the skills of a mechanic. After about 5 minutes, I saw the 12 people I saw enter the laser tag exit. No harm was done. Later that day, I had asked the manager, Bob, what happened that prompted him to make this rule. It turns out that some residents of the small town had gone missing after sometimes going into the laser tag. He showed me the missing posters and even showed me some paperwork with notes by previous employees about the times they went in and how they found the 30-minute mark passed, and then noticing the batch of participants didn't come out. I had realized that what he did was a type of procedure that stopped a monster within the laser tag game. He discovered it in some sort of manual. I realized from his reaction to my notifying him of rule number 2 that the rules weren't there out of silliness. They were there to protect us all. Rule number 3. If a blonde woman in a red dress asks for a prize, under no circumstances should you give any of them to her. This happened to me for the first time about a whole month and 5 weeks into the job. No more and no less. I was given the shift of the prize counter that day. Note to you guys, we change jobs weekly to make sure everyone does what we need do to protect us all. I was working the prize counter. There were interesting things, like the tub balls and the NERF guns you could find, but there were also plush animals. Luckily, the woman in the red dress can take no for an answer, making her one of the least dangerous things on the job at this arcade. I got about 7 tickets from this kid, and they asked for that unicorn, and I gave them one. But in the line was a blonde woman in a red dress, right behind the kid who wanted the unicorn. She looked like her hair was really bleach white. Her dress was like a red-colored version of Morticia's black dress in that TV show. Her figure just looked awfully attractive and creepy. She came up to me and asked, "May I have one of the plastic pirate swords?" Then she offered 5 tickets, exactly the price of the fake weapon. I would have offered it to her, but the thing I found off about the tickets was that there were no numbers on them like they normally do. I said no. She just smiled and walked out of the arcade. I went to the manager to find out more about this rule. "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" "Danforth, are you going to tell me you broke a rule?" "No, just to find out more about," and with that he gave me a stack of papers. When the arcade closed for the night, I read through them, the headlines jumping off the pages. "Family murdered in home." Article from 1985. That article's words read something about one of the guys working at the local arcade and offering a prize to a woman in a red dress the day before the family was murdered. Engaged couple killed. Article from 1987. The wife was working at an arcade when she offered a prize to a woman in a red dress right before the night they were killed. I could see some handwriting, but it was hard to read. It read, "It's the same lady." Several more articles read about someone having offered a prize to a blonde woman in a red dress right before the deaths of them and their families. When I got to the last page, there was handwriting. I better make a rule for this to avoid any more deaths. Rule number 4. If there is a power outage in the after hours, hold still. If an arcade turns on by itself during said outage, go straight to it and play the game until the power comes back. Make sure that when you play the game under that circumstance, to make no mistakes whatsoever. Normally, we are not supposed to play on the job, but if the circumstances for this rule happen, that is where we have an exception. As we switch jobs weekly, I sometimes have janitorial duties in the after hours. 2 weeks into the job, I have janitorial duties in the after hours, and the power goes out, including the obligatory lights that stay on when all the lights are off. I stood completely still, thinking the power outage would be temporary, but an arcade came on, turned on by itself with a startup screen, and the number of credits needed to play already in. This was a standard game of the one with that hamster wheel children love so much, where you have to roll the thing through the course without falling. I walked right up to it, gliding ghost-like right to the childish game, and when I played, it was as if the difficulty was set to expert mode. It was hard not to let the wheel fall off. I kept on playing just to keep it from falling. The hamster wheel was at its first goal end for hours when the power came back on. Relieved, I went to the manager to tell him what happened. "I saw you playing on the job. Rule number 4, rule number 9, or were you slacking off rule number good? If that should happen again, then do that playing. No harm was done that night. And remember, Danforth, if rule number 4 should happen, taking any mistake will do to you what that monster did to Gabriel and Natalie." As I remember from reading a retired employee's account, as we are required to do to avoid making mistakes, he recounted that the 2 kids appeared to go catatonic and their skin went paler after they each got a game over on the mysterious arcade. Rule number 1. Rule number 5. If all the arcade screens show the exact same image, notify the manager immediately. I have janitorial duties, but sometimes I work the prize counter And sometimes I also watch over the laser tag to make sure that it works properly and I don't have to do rule number 2. I had been working for 3 months, and when all the arcade games suddenly blinked on in the after hours, when the games were supposed to be turned off, they all showed the exact same image. The image was that of a mix of a biker chick and a Disney princess of some form. I remember getting the last of the mess I had to clean up from the mini restaurant fast and running straight to the manager. Rule number 5. Okay, Danforth, stay here. I'll take care of this. Then the manager rushed straight to the arcade game with the biggest screen, which was in a corner of the arcade. He stood straight-faced in front of the screen and asked whatever that girl was on the screen, "All right, what do you want this time?" The girl in the image on all the screens spoke to him as if there were multiple girls speaking at once. "You know what I want. Cut the bullshit. Lady, tell me what it is you want. You made rules against it. Remember, you know the games are hungry, not after Gabriel and Natalie. Rules were meant to be broken. You know what I want, Lester, like I'll ever believe that bullshit saying." It seemed as if the arcades were possessed by some strange monster. I felt as if we were dealing with some sort of demon. I remember watching this all helplessly like I had no way to deal with this. You think you could make a rule against the creature I am when I need more what? You know what I want, ... No fucking way am I going to let another child die. Don't you remember? I want someone to play no heart, no soul, hell no, please. Why don't you let this cute little man play it too? Not a chance. You will pay for this. Rule number 1 is there for a reason. There was silence for a few moments. Then she said, "You have given me what I want. All I really wanted was for you to remember the fear you had when I took those souls." After a moment, I heard the manager say, "You bitch," and then the arcade screens turned off. No other incident happened that day. I remember being vividly scared. Rule number 6. Should any patron hear a strange growling noise from any arcade, let them know you'll take care of it. Get a kit from underneath the manager's desk and place it behind the arcade game it is coming from. This incident I'll tell you about happened nearly 5 months into the job. It happens about 5 or 6 times a month. Some kid was complaining about hearing a low growl from the Frogger arcade. There's kits for each arcade underneath the manager's desk, supposedly containing different foods for different monsters inside each arcade. They said that they heard the growling after they completed about 5 levels, and it distracted them so much that they ended up failing into a game over. Don't worry, kid. I'll take care of the problem. I rushed to the manager's office and asked if I could get something from beneath his desk. Rule number 6, Danforth. Yes, rule number 6. Which arcade? Frogger, just a moment. I waited about half an hour outside the manager's office. I was bored, so I was about to leave when he came out with the necessary kit. Here, remember to place it directly behind the arcade. I rushed over to the Frogger arcade and quickly put the kit behind the arcade. Almost immediately, I thought I saw tentacles just take the kit. Nearly immediately. I'll admit that this made me jump so much that one of the kids asked me if I was okay. I'm good. Thanks for your concern, though, if you say it all strained like that, Mr. Crab. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Too late. I'm already picturing you as a sweat-scented candle. I wasn't surprised they said that because they were a teen, but I'm glad they made me smile after this. Rule number 7. If a strange woman's face suddenly shows up at the game, or you throw balls at bottles, close it off until the face is gone. I had the drive to follow this rule after I saw what happened when a patron actually played it when the face showed up. The face looked a lot like that of Olivia Newton-John from when she was in Greece. My getting distracted was what caused the effect of what happens if you break this rule. I saw this adult male start playing the game, and he threw 2 balls without incident. The face showed up right after he threw the 3rd ball that toppled the 3rd set of plastic bottles. The ball hit the face, and I could not believe what happened. The face showed a lot of anger. It stuck its tongue out, then opened wide. The man could hardly believe his eyes. He looked scared. Luckily, no one else was near the game, but then the face just went right off the game and appeared to eat the man whole. I couldn't believe it. I noted the identity of the patron, closed off the game. He do so by adding a sign and some yellow tape to say it's being repaired, and ran to the manager immediately. I told him everything. Danforth, that face tends to show when we least expect it. It's very rare that the face should show up right as the game is being played. You were supposed to tell him to wait between throws in case the face showed up. I did, and he complied. Okay. And that face showed right as he threw the ball, meaning that either the timing was bad or that thing got smarter. I'll look into the incident. For now, close the game off for the rest of the day, and that I did. The face usually goes away after an hour of the game being closed, but it will take longer if it gets to someone. Could be why he wanted me to close off the game for the rest of the day. Rule number 8. If a brunette shows up wearing a black dress, wears a facial tattoo of a spider web, and walks as though she is floating, notify the manager immediately. Around a full 6 months into the job, I was making my rounds after hours, making sure to keep following the rules. The patrons were just leaving when I saw a brunette walk in. It took me a while to notice her face. Yes, she wore a black dress. She did walk like she was floating. She was super tall, as though she was over 8 feet tall. I was about to dismiss her as a patron coming for a prize when I noticed the unmistakable tattoo of a spider web around her right eye. After 6 months of noticing what happens if I break the rules, how could I not rush to the manager's office on instinct? Rule number 8, boss, bring her to me, Danforth. It'll take a while, so wait outside when she's here. I had a feeling that he might have met her before. I looked all over for this girl. I'll admit she was beautiful, though the manager wants me to have her in his office. When I found her near the Pac-Man, she looked at me as if she was scared to death. I told her she'd be okay, and brought her to the manager's office. She immediately went inside, and I waited outside just as he asked. It did take a while. Boredom was setting in, and the arcade screens turning on and off was getting annoying. The brunette walked out, seemingly calm, and she left the arcade. The manager's eyes appeared bloodshot. I asked him what was going on. I can't tell you, but were the arcade screens acting strange? They were turning on and off over and over. He paused for a moment. He looked, and the arcade screens were still doing it. Danforth, yes, boss, it's time. We have to break rule number 9 tomorrow. Rule number 9. Do not play the nameless arcade game that randomly shows up in every corner of the arcade. This arcade has no name at all. Almost every day, the game randomly shows up on another corner. The arcade screens have different ways of acting if the brunette shows up, he told me. If they were showing weird images and cycling, it meant that there was nothing wrong. If they were showing the image of that girl, the brunette was there, he had to let her talk to the brunette. But if they were flashing like that, like what happened the day before, then we'd have to do what we did that day. This time, the nameless arcade showed up close to the entrance. It was almost like muscle memory for me to try and put the out of order sign on it. But the manager just waved me off. I need to do this to keep this business going and to protect everyone. I was looking over his shoulder as to what the game was all about. His own name, which I never knew until then, which was Lester Harrison, showed up in the top left corner, just like how the names of each kid had when they played No Art, No Soul. I heard that in this nameless arcade game, the avatar was consistent, unlike that one that rule number 1 is all about. In it, the avatar looked like a rich male with a disfigured face. My boss cut the man to the right of the arcade game, and the man talked to what appeared to be a zombified blend of a biker punk girl and the disguise that the two FBI characters in. They seemed to talk in an unintelligible language, a mix of Spanish and Irish, I think. Then the screen changed to black with white text that said, "Please choose a new manager." Then the manager said, "I already did. He's my best employee. I think he's fit for the job." Then the text changed to say, "Danforth Crab, indeed he is eligible." Then it changed into a game, like one of the ones described in the one in rule number 1 that was added after the .exe ones, after the deaths of those two kids. In this case, it was the avatar in a burning version of the Green Hill Zone in Sonic the Hedgehog. Then the manager went catatonic, his skin paler. I decided to move his body off of it, and then the text said, "Now that you have taken the managerial duties in his place, please move the character to the goal." He would have wanted you to manage the arcade and protect everyone. Then I did as it asked. I noticed that the name on the corner changed to mine, so I played it to bring the avatar to the goal. I was scared still, even when I managed to get it playing. Scared because the manager died right then and there before the game had me play. I was mentally scarred by the experiences of following and seeing the effects of breaking each rule. But I had to do it. It took a while, but when I finally got him to the goal, I was relieved. Then it switched to a text that said, "You have passed the test. I assure you that you will do what you can and save us all. Remember to read the manual on the desk so that you can fulfill your job. Goodbye." And then the arcade turned itself off. I went to Lester Harrison's office, now mine, and looked into the manual. I was scared because I had never taken such a job before, and witnessing his death, having been like what happened to Gabriel and Natalie, still scarred me. The manual was leather-bound, had the rules, the reasons why, and instructions on how employees must be trained. On the last page, it said, Rule number 10, "The establishment must always have a manager and owner."